Hey everyone, it's Pam from Crafts by Pam, and welcome back to another video tutorial on my YouTube channel and blog. Today's card features some stamps from Pajama Crafter Stamps featuring this little cute dinosaur and a rainbow background. Here's a closer look at the card that we'll be creating today. We're going to create a watercolor background using some distress inks, and we're going to Copic color this cute birthday dinosaur, or dinosaur as my 2-year-old would say. To get started with our card today, we're going to need a top folding card base, some black cardstock, as well as some scrap white cardstock. Our card base is 8.5 by 4.25 inches and scored at 5.5 inches on the 8.5-inch side. We're just using a bone folder to smooth out that crease to make sure it's nice and smooth. And then our black cardstock is 4.25 by 5.5 inches. We're going to put both of those to the side for right now. And our scrap cardstock, we're going to put that to the side, but we're also going to need some watercolor cardstock that's cut to 4.25 by 5.5. We're going to use the smooth side of that and some paper that's great for Copic coloring. We're going to begin our card today by starting with our background. So we have that watercolor paper and some distress inks in spun sugar, dried marigold, squeezed lemonade, cracked pistachio, and salvage patina. We're also going to need some water with some paintbrushes. And before we even do our watercoloring, we're going to do some heat embossing. So here's the two stamp sets that we're going to use. This one is called Prehistoric Birthday. We're going to use big birthday wishes and that dinosaur, as well as that little confetti and the happy birthday balloon. And then from Mix and Match Celebration Sentiments, we're going to use birthday or on your birthday, but you could also use happy birthday as well. For this step, I went ahead and pulled out my mini Missy so that we could do some stamping. First, I'm going to use some anti-static powder all over my watercolor cardstock. And then I'm going to take these icons from the Prehistoric Birthday stamp set and stamp them in all different directions on my cardstock. So I use my Misty to pick up those stamps. I'm going to go ahead and ink them up with some embossing ink, and then I'm going to stamp them onto my cardstock. Now before I move on to add more icons, I'm going to add some embossing powder to those icons, and then I'm going to go ahead and stamp more icons. So I'm going to do all the stamping first with the embossing powder and applying the embossing powder, and then at the end I'm going to go ahead and heat emboss the entire thing. So I've got my two icons already stamped and embossed with some powder, and then I'm going to go ahead and stamp more icons and brush off all the excess powder that I don't need, and then we'll heat emboss the entire panel. And here's a closer look of what that looks like with that white embossing powder heated up. Now we can go ahead and move on to our watercoloring. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with our first color, which is spun sugar. And I'm just going to smush it onto my work surface. And I'm going to wet my entire panel just with some water from a spray bottle. And then I'm going to use a paintbrush to pick up that ink from the spun sugar and apply that in the upper left hand corner of my paper. So once I add that, I'm going to go in and do the same thing with dried marigold and continue in a gradient all the way down to the bottom right hand corner. So it'll be pink, orange, yellow, green, and blue. Now between each layer I do heat set and then add another layer of watercolor just to darken it, because our first layer isn't very dark for what I want on my final card. So by heat setting it and adding more layers, you'll get the darker colors that you want. So here's a final look at our background panel all heat set. It's nice and bright and rainbow colored. I love it. You can also see how we white emboss the images, and they basically resist the watercolor so that you could see the images in white. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to stamping our dinosaur from the Prehistoric Birthday. And I'm just stamping him with some Copic friendly ink because I'm going to be using my Copic alcohol markers to color him in. So I'm just going ahead and stamping that a few times. I only showed the one. And then I'm going to go ahead and heat set that just to make sure I don't get any smudging when I do start coloring. Sometimes I do find that that does happen if I don't heat set it. So for our first color, RVO2, I'm going to outline our dinosaur. So this is my darkest pink that I'm going to be using. So I'm just going to outline on the left side, on the inside of the legs, around the tail, both the top and the bottom, and then around the body and around the mouth and head area, as well as underneath that hat. And I'm also going to add shadows where they might naturally be otherwise. So under the cake and under the hands of the dinosaur. And then I'm going to go in with my next color, which is my lighter pink, which is RV10. And all I'm doing is I'm going back to that darker pink and blending that out so I have a smooth transition between the darker and the lighter pink. So I'm really just focusing on the areas where I put the darker pink, and then I'm going to go in and basically fill in the rest of the areas that are missing color with that lighter pink. Once I fill in the image with that lighter color, I always like to go back and put back in my shadow with that darker color and then just blend out just a little bit more to make sure I have a smooth transition from the dark to the light to the lightest color, which is where I filled in the rest of the pink. Right now, like you can see that there are gaps where the pink just isn't really well blended. But by going back and putting that darker color in, going back and putting that light color in, and then filling in another layer, I'm getting a good smooth transition. And now I'm moving on to our green color. So I'm using G00 to fill in the lighter parts of our cake as well as his party hat. And then I'm going to go in with my darker green, which is G02 for the bottom of the cake or the plate that the cake is on and the sprinkles of the cake, the candle, and the spots on the party hat. I also went back in with RVO2 for the cheeks, which I had forgotten to do before. And that's pretty much it for our dinosaur. So now I can use my brother's scan and cut to go ahead and cut that dinosaur out. Sometimes it doesn't leave smooth edges, so I go in with my scissors to just fussy cut where there might be some jagged edges. I also don't show it, but I forgot to color in the candle light uh, for our dinosaurs. So after the fact of making the video, I went in with a Y15 on the candle flame for our dinosaur. Now I'm just using some dies from my stash to create a layout for my card. So I have a circle and a scalloped border. I place the circle in my MISTI to stamp the sentiment, big birthday wishes on your birthday. So I combine the two sentiments, big birthday wishes from one stamp set and on your birthday from the other stamp set. I'm also using another die from this die set from my stash to cut the background panel out. So it cut it down to 4 inches by 5¼ inches. And it also created a diagonal split for the layout of the card. So what I did then is I went ahead and put the two pieces on the back and I used some tape to adhere them together. And then I used that line to line up my scallop border and adhered that down with some liquid adhesive. And really, you don't have to cut the cardstock in half, but the die did it for me, and it helped me to line up where I wanted that scallop border to go. So you can use something like I did, or you can just use your paper trimmer to cut the background in half and then use some type of scallop border from your stash to complete the same look. Now I can go ahead and cut off the excess from that scallop border, just using some scissors to fussy cut that off. And then my panel is complete. I can use some tape runner adhesive and apply that to our background. And then I'm going to adhere that to our sheet of black cardstock, which was 4¼ by 5½ inches, and it's going to cover our card base. So I'm just making sure I'm lining that up straight. I do think it took me a couple of times, but the tape runner adhesive is pretty forgiving, so you've got a little bit of time to rearrange it. So now I'm going to add some more tape runner adhesive to the back of the black border that we created and go ahead and adhere that to our top folding card base. Now we can go ahead and add the other elements to our card. So I'm going to use some foam tape adhesive to pop this up on the card and give us some dimension. So first I'm putting some foam tape on the back of our sentiment and on the back of our dinosaur. Then I'm going to go ahead and remove the backing of the foam tape and adhere both of those to my card. Then lastly, I'm going to go ahead and adorn the card with some matte black enamel dots that are from my stash. So I'm just going to do a range of different sizes from the top left of the card to the bottom right hand side of the card. That way I can kind of keep that flow where it's from the top left to the bottom right, just like I have with my sentiment and my dinosaur. So that pretty much finishes up my card today. Here's a look at the original card that I created. Pretty much exactly the same, except one has a flame colored in and one does not. And yeah, so that's it. So thank you so much, guys, for watching. I appreciate you. And if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you guys next time. Bye!